Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Bender, and I'm the Sire Professor of Economics at the University of Aberdeen. And I'd like to welcome you to this little lecture, entitled Economics at Aberdeen, the Legacy of Sir Thomas Jaffray. This year, the University of Aberdeen is celebrating its 525 years since Bishop William Elphinston established the university based on a foundational purpose of being, quote, open to all and dedicated to the pursuit of truth in the service of others. The Department of Economics is also celebrating an anniversary this year, the establishment of the Jaffray Chair in Political Economy, which was instituted by ordinance on the 22nd of October, 1920. In this anniversary year, I'm writing a short history of the chair, starting with Sir Thomas Jaffray, who endowed the chair, and then briefly of each of the chair holders of the last 100 years. Sadly, it seems that Sir Thomas is a forgotten figure in Aberdeen's past, which is surprising given that at the turn of the 20th century, he was clearly one of the most respected businessmen and philanthropists in the city. Indeed, as we will see, his philosophy on civic life parallels well the sentiments given in the university's foundational purpose. In what follows, I'll give a brief summary of his contributions to Aberdeen, to the university, and a bit of insight into the 7 people who have held the chair that he established 100 years ago. Thomas was born to Thomas Jaffray and Leslie Wink on the 6th of February, 1855. The elder Thomas was a railway inspector on the Great North of Scotland Railway Company. Thomas had 4 sisters, Jane, Agnes, Lesliana, and Margaret, and one brother, Robert Leslie, pictured here, who would later become a graduate of the University of Aberdeen and the local Free Church College to become a Free Church minister in Camelon and Edinburgh, as well as a poet of local renown. Sadly, he passed away at an early age of 46. Nothing is known of Thomas's education. It's certainly likely that he went to a local secondary school, but while his brother went to the grammar school, there is no record of Thomas attending the grammar. He most likely left school to be an apprentice accountant starting at the North of Scotland Bank in 1877. While there, he met and married Margaret Tuch in 1887, a happy union that lasted until her death 43 years later. Thomas and Margaret never had any children, but they did take in a Jewish girl from Austria, Ernestine Friedlander, who was sent abroad to escape the same Nazi regime who kidnapped and eventually killed her father. She arrived in Aberdeen on the 11th of January 1939 at 9 years of age. Ernestine eventually graduated from the University of Aberdeen, married an economist, and taught languages at a local school in Kent. First living at Ingleside in Rubisaw Den South, Thomas and Margaret lived much of their married life in Edge Hill House in Miltimber. It was on a large estate with a very smart and extensive garden. It also housed a large, if eclectic, art collection, built over years of travel in Scotland and abroad. His view of art was simple, as Jaffray was guided by this maxim, quote, if a picture does not give me joy, I have no use for it. Sadly, the house no longer stands as it was demolished in the 1970s to turn the grounds into more housing for the growing population along the Deeside. Thomas was a banker by trade. As mentioned, he was first employed with the North of Scotland Bank in 1877 at the West End branch and was promoted to accountant in 1881. Soon after, he moved to the up-and-coming Aberdeen Savings Bank on Exchange Street. The Aberdeen Savings Bank was founded in 1815 as a bank for the working class, catering for small depositors. Jaffray was successful in the bank, ascending to the post of actuary in 1892, a position that he held for 37 years until his retirement in 1929. He is pictured here just a few years after becoming actuary. Under his careful management, he modernized banking operations and greatly expanded the depositor base. In one of his biggest contributions to the bank, Jaffray oversaw the building of a new headquarters for the Savings Bank on Union Terrace in 1896. You can still see the carved words Savings Bank on the building on Union Terrace today. The building was designed by Sir William Kelly, the architect who designed many Aberdeen buildings at that time, as well as the leopards on Union Bridge, the so-called Kelly's cats. The building opened to a great fanfare. Due to his importance in leading one of the most important banks in the city and the fifth largest savings bank in the UK, Jaffrey had the opportunity to meet national dignitaries when they came to Aberdeen, including meeting U.S. Ambassador Joseph Kennedy, father of future U.S. President John F. Kennedy, when he visited Aberdeen for the Seabury Memorial celebrations at St. Andrew's Cathedral in 1938. He also hosted Lloyd George and Winston Churchill during their separate visits to Aberdeen. There's a wonderful newsreel at the National Library of Scotland website of Churchill's visit to Aberdeen to receive the freedom of the city in 1946, where Churchill is shown planting a tree with Jaffrey at Edge Hill. Clearly, Jaffrey was a leading local businessman, but he felt a great duty to give back to his hometown. Among his philanthropic activities, he donated a monument to honor those who fell during World War I who had graduated from the Free Church College where his brother had attended seminary. The monument now hangs in the King's College campus after the Free Church College closed on Afford Place. Along with Lord and Lady Cowdrey, he also made a substantial donation of £25,000 in 1927 to the Aberdeen Joint Hospital Fund for a hospital for sick children and a maternity hospital. This eventually became the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. Sir Thomas gave his time just as freely as his money. He was the chairman of the Aberdeen branch of the Royal Horticultural Society, but his lasting contribution to Aberdeen's civic life was as a member of the Aberdeen Art Gallery Committee. He became chair of the committee from 1928 until 1951, when he oversaw both an expansion of the building and of the collection. Harry Townsend, former director and curator of the art gallery, said that Sir Thomas moved the gallery, quote, from being a small provincial museum to become one of the leading galleries of the kingdom. In honor of his long patronage and leadership, subscribers paid for Jaffrey's portrait to be painted by renowned Irish portrait painter Sir William Orpin. The picture here is actually a second portrait that was painted by Orpin, as apparently Jaffrey was not particularly enamored with the first one. Jaffrey started his relationship with the university as part of the Court Advisory Committee in Commerce. It was during this time that he donated £20,000 to endow the Jaffrey Chair in Political Economy in October of 1920. He was appointed to court in 1924 as the rector's assessor and remained on court until 1937. During that time, he was also involved with the newly designed memorial for Bishop Elphinston. While the university's founder's tomb was significantly damaged during the Reformation, it was not until 1909 that there were serious discussions about a new memorial in the chapel. The plan for it was for it to be installed by 1931 to celebrate the 500th anniversary of Elphinston's birth. The artist, Henry Wilson of Kent, was engaged in 1918 to create the memorial, but delivered a much larger than expected monument. Parts of it were installed in the chapel in the mid-1920s, as seen in the picture here, but it was clear that it was far too large for the space. Since the Memorial Committee had spent all of its funds, Jaffrey gave £1,000 to rebuild the memorial in the antechapel, with work starting in 1929. It was completed in time for the anniversary celebrations. A picture from those celebrations is included here. The memorial remained in the antechapel until it was moved to its more familiar location outside of the chapel in 1946, when the war memorial in the antechapel was expanded to include those who had fallen in World War II. During Jaffrey's life, he accumulated many accolades, honoring his service to his city. He was given an honorary LL.D. from the university in 1922 and awarded the Freedom of the City in 1928. He was nationally recognized in the New Year's Honors List in 1920, becoming a knight, and then a baronet in 1931. Age seemed to slow him only slightly, with an obituary mentioning that he kept playing golf and fishing, even to age 86. He passed away on the 23rd of July, 1953, and had his funeral service in King's College Chapel. He was buried in Allenvale Cemetery, along with Margaret and eventually Agnes, who he married in 1932 after Margaret had passed away. His obituary in the local Press and Journal on the 24th of July, 1953 noted, "His munificence throughout a lifetime spent in and around his native city has perpetuated his name in banking, education, art, and medicine in Aberdeen. Even with his passing, Sir Thomas's many legacies to the city and university can be seen today. The art gallery, after its most recent renovation, continues to be a leading art museum, recently becoming the 2020 Art Fund Museum of the Year with 4 other UK museums. Closer to home is his legacy to the university, and specifically to the Department of Political Economy, as it was known then, or the Department of Economics, as it's known now. Instrumental to the development of economics at Aberdeen were the 7 people who have held the Jaffray Chair, each contributing significantly to the study and teaching of economics at Aberdeen. Next, I will discuss each one briefly. Born near Dundee in 1882, Professor Alexander Gray was educated at Edinburgh before joining the UK Civil Service. He wrote that he was not intending to take up the chair when he was shortlisted. Indeed, he tried to withdraw his application. But the then principal, Reverend George Adam Smith, was very persuasive. In his career at Aberdeen and then at Edinburgh, Sir Alexander was an influential economist, especially around his research on Adam Smith and through his presidency of the Scottish Economic Society. However, outside economics, he's actually best known for his poetry, both in Scots and in English. Perhaps his best known poem is entitled Scotland, with its famous stanza, "This is my country, the land that begot me. These windy spaces are surely my own, and those who here toil in the sweat of their faces are flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone." Professor Linley Fraser was born in Edinburgh in 1904, but raised in Liverpool. He studied classics at Oxford and received a PhD in economics in the USA. He returned to Oxford to teach. One of his students was future Prime Minister Harold Wilson, and he took up the Jaffray Chair in 1935. Like Sir Alexander, his primary contributions to economics were around economic thought. Also like Sir Alexander, he is known more for activities outside of economics, especially during his secondment during World War II to head up the BBC German language service. After the war, he remained at the BBC in London, giving up the chair in 1945. Professor Henry Hamilton was born on Islay in 1896 and educated at the University of Glasgow. Before taking the chair, he was already well known at the university, as he had held a lectureship in economic history since 1925. During his time, there was a significant expansion of political economy at Aberdeen, and Professor Hamilton was a central figure in Aberdeen's administration, serving as a dean and a member of court. His area of research was on Scottish economic history, particularly around the Industrial Revolution. Sadly, I can't find a picture of him, but this is a picture of one of his most well-known works. The next chair after Professor Hamilton was Professor Max Gaskin, who was born and educated in Liverpool. Unlike the earlier chairs, Professor Gaskin was famous before taking up the chair, as he was a decorated airman from World War II, earning the Distinguished Flying Cross with a bar, flying over 60 missions as part of bombing raids in Europe. He was also a past president of the Scottish Economic Society and served as an economic consultant for the Secretary of State for Scotland from 1965 through 1987. His research specialty was initially on banking, but he also wrote one of the first significant economic analyses of the impact of North Sea oil discoveries on Aberdeen and Scotland. Professor Peter Sloan came back to Aberdeen for the second time to take up the chair in 1984, after spending 3 years in Aberdeen in the late 1960s. Educated at Sheffield and Strathclyde, Professor Sloan started the recent tradition of the Jaffray Chair being focused on labor market economics. He was a long-time head of department and was also vice principal and dean of faculty during his time at Aberdeen. Authoring or editing 30 books, 43 book chapters, and over 100 peer-reviewed journal articles, he is one of the most widely published of the Jaffray Chairs. He's also known for his pioneering research in sports economics, and recently had a prize named after him by the European Association of Sports Economics. After a couple-year break, the university recruited Professor Tim Barmby from the University of Durham in 2004. Educated at Hull and Birmingham, Professor Barmby held academic positions at Loughborough and Newcastle upon Tyne. Also known for his extensive research on labor economics, he has particular research expertise on absenteeism, tournaments, and firm hierarchies. Latterly, he has developed an interest in the economic history of labor contracts during the Industrial Revolution. Professor Barmby served as the managing editor to the Scottish Journal of Political Economy, the journal for the Scottish Economic Society. Professor Cathy Montagna became the department's first woman chair of economics when she joined from Dundee University in 2013, and then became the first female Jaffrey chair in 2018. Originally from Italy, she studied at the universities of Parma, Glasgow, and Dundee. She has kept the recent tradition of an interest in labor economics research in the chair, but has broadened it to focus on the interaction between globalization, industrial relations, and redistributive policies in determining labor market outcomes and aggregate performance. She is currently the co-managing editor of the Scottish Journal of Political Economy and was recently named as a Fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences. Each of these Jaffrey chairs have contributed significantly to the development and growth in economics at Aberdeen. Political economy, or in its more recent incarnation as economics, has been taught at Aberdeen for over 100 years as a formal subject, and is now the home to over 20 research active staff from across the world. While many subjects are covered, the department has long held strengths in labor economics and energy economics, the latter particularly around oil and gas, but more recently incorporating a broader focus on energy. In the last 15 years, it also established the first experimental lab in economics in Scotland, the Scottish Experimental Economics Laboratory. The subject continues to be popular with undergraduates and postgraduates alike, as shown by its recent performance in the 2021 Complete University Guide. There is no doubt that Sir Thomas would be proud of the accomplishments of the department that he so generously funded. I'll leave you with this one final picture of him. We've seen a couple pictures of Sir Thomas, but I like the painting given to the University of Aberdeen by a great nephew of Sir Thomas, which at one time hung at the Aberdeen Savings Bank building on Union Terrace. It was painted by David Foggy in 1942. It shows an older Sir Thomas, but his earnest and clear gaze holds the observer. He still looks sharp in his suit, and he is ready to take notes for his next conversation, as it will no doubt be something worthy of his time and great gifts. Consistent with the university's foundational purpose, Jaffrey was quick to offer his service to good causes. Indeed, service was clearly a foundational purpose for Jaffrey, as shown in a reflection on Jaffrey's life found in the Aberdeen University Review. Jaffrey said, "I have always been of the opinion that every citizen should regard it as his duty, as surely as it is his privilege, to devote at least a part of his means to public, civic, and charitable causes, and to spend a measure of his physical and mental gifts in the service of his neighbors." Thank you very much for your time listening to this. Just before I take any questions, I do want to give a couple of thank yous because I've been working on this topic for a little while now. So the first set of thank yous go to Michelle Gate and those in the Wolfson Reading Room, and to Neil Curtis and his colleagues in the university museums for all of their help for tracking down materials and patiently listening to my excited ramblings when I find something new about Jaffrey or one of the chairs. Thanks also go to Dr. Bert Shaw, Professor Alex Kemp, Professor Peter Sloan, and Professor Tim Barmby for helpful conversations about the history and people of the chair, of the people in the chair. And final thanks to members of the Aberdeen History and Stories of the Past Facebook group, and especially to Pauline Gerard, who found his grave, and to Ron Malcolm, a cousin of Sir Thomas, for information about Sir Thomas's mother. So I just want to thank all of those people who've helped me find out a little bit more about Sir Thomas and the various chairs. But happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
We don't actually have any questions sitting here at the moment, but if you would like to ask anything, please pop your questions in the chat and we'll be happy to answer. We'll give it a few moments to see if questions come through, but just as a reminder to everybody attending, This lecture is part of a series of little lectures from schools across the university, and you're more than welcome to attend as many of these as you like. They will be running for another couple of weeks yet, and recordings will also be made available of any that you might have missed on the same web page. I think we'll just wait another, maybe till 25 past, and see if any questions come in.
Okay. I have my email address up on the slide too. I'm more than happy to have any questions sent to me as well. Maybe I'll note as well that I'm as I mentioned right at the beginning, I am planning on writing up this history. I've got other information as well, and hopefully that will be published in the new year, certainly as a working paper on the Department of Economics website on the business school webpage for the university. So come back at that point, and you'll be able to read a little bit more about the history.
We've got one question here. Excellent talk, Keith. How did the Jaffray chairs influence the curriculum taught at Aberdeen?
Great. Well, thank you for the question. So clearly, early on, the first several chairs, Alexander Gray and Lindley Fraser, they were very concerned about the sort of broader issues in economics. I mean, they really did take that idea of political economy when it was a much broader subject than maybe it is now, or at least has been over the last 20 or 30 years. And they really shaped and helped shape that idea of economics as a way of thought, and their own research on Adam Smith, for example, in the case of Gray, and around the rhetoric of economics, which is really what Lindley Fraser was very keen on, the language of economics in economic thought. That formed the basis for a lot of the early curriculum for economics. As it became more applied, as the discipline became more applied, the chairs themselves became a little bit more applied, particularly after Professor Harrison, and so it shaped it in that way as well. And then clearly, with the start of Professor Sloan and the real focus on labor market economics, it helped solidify that idea that economics, while it is still a fundamental social science, it can be applied as well to real world problems.
Great, thank you. We've had a few more flooding in now, so say that I've popped the link to the little lecture series in the chat for anybody who wants to look at others. We've also had a few people commenting that they've really enjoyed the talk and thanking you for it. Some other questions. Someone has asked, what was Sir Thomas like as a personality?
I mean, that's really hard to find out. I mean, because he didn't have any children, I think one of the reasons why that he doesn't seem to have this kind of very upfront legacy, it makes it really difficult to truly find out about the man himself. But I think we can get some hints a little bit about his family. His family was very religious. I mentioned his brother, who was a minister in the Free Church. I know that they were elders in their local church, and I think that early upbringing really did bring about a sense of this service that I kept on referring to in the talk. And I think even he clearly was a banker, and he directed an important bank in Aberdeen. But in what I can read from what he's written, I think he really believed that the kind of bank that he was offering, this small bank to small depositors, was really an important thing to give opportunities to people that wouldn't have opportunities otherwise. And so I think even at his core, in terms of his work, he felt that he was giving back to people who didn't have very much. And then all the other things, all the kind of public philanthropy that he did in terms of the art gallery and the university, again, is about education. It's about lifting up of individuals. And then he was also, as I mentioned, very keen on healthcare, and was part of the drive to really build up the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary campus. So that substantial donation of £25,000 in 1927 was a huge amount of money to help build those areas. So we can kind of get hints at that, but besides that, I don't really know a whole lot.
Great, thank you. We've got one more, which hopefully we can fit in just before we finish. Is there a legacy in Jaffrey's interest in the combination of art and economics? All
right, interesting. I haven't really thought about that. I don't think there is any formal relationship between the two. I think maybe it's through education, as I mentioned earlier, is this idea that the edification of individuals. But I don't. In all of the research that I've done, I haven't seen any direct linkage between this idea of the educational side from the university and supporting the university and the art itself. I think they're both things that he was quite passionate about, but beyond these things that I've mentioned, I don't see any other kind of linkages between them.
Great, thank you. We've got one more, which I have. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it. Someone had said, I think they've joined later, so she said, I may have missed this, but was Jaffray involved in the selection of the early chairs before he passed away?
That's a good question. So he I believe he was on the selection committee for the first Jaffray chair, because he was on court at that time, and when you were applying for a chair or interviewing for the chair, you actually did go in front of court. So I think he was involved with that chair. I found no other evidence though of the latter chairs, so Lindley Fraser or Henry Hamilton. I don't think he had any direct role in hiring them. So I don't know, but I haven't found any historical record to indicate that he did.
Okay, I think that's us up to date with the questions. I think for anybody who may have had any connection problems, someone has mentioned separately that they did. The recording will be available on the webpage. It may take a few days or so to appear, but please feel free to go back and watch what you may have missed. And other than that, we've had more people just thanking you for your time and sharing your knowledge on this subject. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for everybody's interest.